So I would like to introduce Jewel Cannada-Wynn, City Council President, District 7. City Councilwoman Jewel Cannada-Wynn was elected to represent District 7 in November 2012. She currently serves as president. The Central Florida native has served the Pensacola community as a chairperson of the Community Redevelopment Agency, as a board member on Community Enterprise Investments Incorporated, Westside Redevelopment Board, and the Florida Alabama Transportation Planning Organization. After graduating high school, Councilwoman Cannada-Wynn served our country as a security forces specialist in the United States Air Force. Despite seeing the world, her roots and connection to Northwest Florida remained deep. She ventured back home to earn an MA in teaching history and applied her passion in the Stagnant County School District for over 25 years. I'm sure that her 3 children and 6 grandchildren are the crown jewels of Jewel's career in public service. However, in my opinion, her recent 2020 God and Government Award at the 44th Annual Government of Prayer Breakfast ranks pretty high as well on her list. The other half of the dynamic duo is Marcie Whitaker, who has been a resident of the city of Pensacola for over 20 years. She has over 14 years of experience in affordable housing and community development fields. Currently, Marcie serves as a director for the City of Pensacola Housing Office, which provides program oversight and administration for the city's Community Development Block Grant, Home Partnership Act, and the State Housing Initiative Partnership. These grants funds are used to support all manner of affordable housing initiatives and community enhancement projects undertaken within the city. Additionally, the Housing Office administers the Section 8 Housing Choice Vouchers and HUD Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing Programs, providing rental assistance to approximately 2,400 participants throughout Stagnant County. Prior to entering public service, Whitaker had 10 years of experience in the environmental consulting industry. She received her Bachelor of Arts and Master of Business Administration from the University of South Alabama in Mobile, Go Jags. The two are leading an aggressive affordable housing campaign of 500 homes in 5 years. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. Talk to us about workforce housing. You now have the floor, ladies.
Okay, thank you, Al. We appreciate being invited to participate in this. I'm going to talk a little bit first, and then the councilwoman will chime in, I'm sure. We don't have a fancy presentation for you, so you're just going to have to listen to us talk. I have to say that one of the things when Paige was talking, I had to stop myself and think, where are all my important documents? Where is my birth certificate? Where are those things? Because it is so true in our community. If you're doing anything to establish yourself, those documents are critical. So I appreciated her pointing that out. You can't hear me? Oh, okay. Do I need to move up? Is that better? No? Can y'all hear me okay?
You're a little bit low. I don't know if you can turn your mic up just a little bit, a tad bit.
That better?
Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. I'll sit up closer too. The council president came to me last year actually with this wonderful vision, and she had a wonderful goal, and it was 500 homes in 5 years. And she was so excited about it, and she really wanted to address the need for affordable housing in our community. So she and I started working together. We came up with a group of subject matter experts in our community that council appointed. We held our first meeting in February, and then due to the virus, things were kind of put on hold for a little while. Then we reconvened in June and also put in place the Florida Housing Coalition, which is an advocacy group that's known statewide for being kind of again, a subject matter expert and a leader in our community and in the state for affordable housing issues. We hired them to kind of facilitate the process for us. And in June, they came forward with a database kind of painting a picture of where we are in Pensacola and what that means and where the gaps are and things that maybe we could look at to address some of those needs. And I will agree with Chuck that the current model really does revolve around income. You know, your income kind of drives how much house you can afford. In our community, as a pointed out, a lot of the folks in our community don't have big incomes. So when an average home in our community costs $200,000, that really is out of the price range. Where most people, for a low-income family, you're talking about something that's between $125,000 to $130,000. And for a moderate income family, you're talking about something that's right around $190,000. So obviously there is a need for us to address. At that presentation, we talked about kind of what we've been doing historically. What have we been bringing to the community? And we were able to identify that over the last several years, we've produced about 50 units. Now, those units also include homes that we've done rehab on. And I kind of like keeping that component in there because that addresses the fact that we want to keep our neighborhoods intact. We don't want to do some of those models that Chuck was showing us where, you have your lovely home and then they build a 20-story condo right next door, which completely changes the look of your neighborhood. So we've concentrated on rehab and then also on new construction. And new construction really has been through our partnerships. And again, I'll agree with Abe that the partnerships are very, very important to make all our dollars go further, to help our citizens meet the resources they need to get to the individuals that can help them. And some of those partnerships, we've actually had Habitat, Escambia County Housing Finance Authority. We work very, very closely with Escambia County, the Neighborhood Enterprise Division there at Escambia County, to make sure that we are producing the units that we need. The last task force meeting we had was in July, and in July they went through a group of recommendations, and I want to say there were probably maybe as many as 20 recommendations, and the committee kind of narrowed it down to 6 that they're going to concentrate on that will be brought forward at their last meeting August 27th. That's a Thursday. It'll be live streamed on the city's website at 3:30, so anybody's welcome to join and watch. And the 6 areas that they identified that really we should concentrate on moving forward are engaging our strategic partners, which again, we've all talked about how important that partnership is, collaborating with the private sectors to identify incentives that will help private sector produce those necessary affordable units, leverage our existing city properties. We had a long discussion about possibly using pieces or portions of some of the city parks, just to be more creative with some of the parcels maybe that the city still owns. Support tax credit development, and that is where a private investor comes in and builds a unit, and then they are rented at a certain income level to certain income individuals. One of the newest ones going up right now is Vista 17 on Cervantes Street. There's one kind of right across the street from it, actually, that is the Inglewood Seniors Towers. Both of those are tax credit projects. Identify suitable sites for small unit development. And I think there the task force was really looking at something that we all tend to forget about, and it really does help fill that gap or build that bridge. Not everything has to be either an apartment complex or a single family home. It could be something like a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex, something where you're housing more individuals, but could still very easily blend in with the fabric of our neighborhoods. And then adaptive reuse of former sites. And there they were talking about taking some of the old retail parcels that are vacant now, redoing those for either apartment or townhome development or condominium development. The councilwoman and I even looked at some of the church properties and things like that in our communities that are now vacant. Some way that we could possibly reuse those and put those into use for affordable housing. Abe is right that the fair market rents and rents in our community have gone up. A fair market rent for a 2-bedroom unit right now is $954. So that does include, when we talk fair market rent, HUD is talking rent plus utilities. So if you back out the utilities, we're probably somewhere around $800 or so for a 2-bedroom unit. But the other piece of that fair market rent, it is based on 40% of what market rate is renting for. So that means 60% of our market is renting for more than that $800 a unit. So it is very expensive right now for people to look for units. Again, I'll kind of echo what everybody said. This is going to be a new time for our community as a whole, and how we come through this and come out on the other side of the COVID environment is going to be telling for us. I think we have some challenges that we're going to be meeting in the near future when some of the eviction moratoriums and foreclosure moratoriums are lifted. So I think the task force, the proposals they brought forward, some of the things that they're hoping to put into place and address is at a very timely and excellent point for us to be doing this. And the other thing, the councilwoman, I don't want to take her thunder because I'm sure she has things she wants to add, but the other thing she has asked us to do is actually not just do a study, not just do another study and set it on the shelf. She wants actual things that we're going to be implementing coming out of this moving forward to make a difference in our community. And that kind of sums up my quick little summary. I'll be glad to turn it over to Council President Cannada-Wynn.
All right, thank you. Marcie, can you hear me?
I think you're muted, Councilwoman.
Yes, ma'am, you're unmuted now.
Okay, I'm on. You can hear me. All right. I wanted to go back just a little bit because about 6 years ago, we started what we call a housing initiative with the city of Pensacola. And every piece of property that we sold, we kind of put it in a little fund. And then that little fund was to help with housing and workforce housing. And so that we had no direction as to how to get into the workforce housing area. And so that is how we started looking at a task force to be able to help us look at what our options were and alternatives. The 500 just came up as a way of keeping momentum, because normally if you just do a study or you don't put some parameters in there, you kind of just forget about it. So I like to put a number to things. So that's how we got the 500. Of course, I wanted more, but the mayor and Marcie just said I was just too much of a visionary here. That was going to be too much. And so that's when we got together with, like Marcie stated, that we sat down and talked about how we are going to address workforce housing. As an educator, and you working really hard, I had teachers who would say, well, you know, Jewel, I would love to move there. I can't afford it. So if your baseline salary, even at $37,000 as an educator, they could not afford to live. So this is how it has evolved into how do we make a difference here at the city with workforce housing. I wanted to also, you know, piggyback on the idea of our kids. I'm a dean, and so sometimes when kids come into your office with disciplinary issues, they are just not disciplinary issues. Normally there are other things that are going on in their lives. And so our young people react, you know, they don't have the skills yet to cope with some of these things. And so they react. And I remember one incident, you know, the kids were coming out of the house and the sheriff's office is at the house and they're putting the eviction notice. So the babies are getting ready to come to school. So when they're getting ready to come to school, they're upset because they don't know where they're going to live when they get off that bus that afternoon. So they don't know. And so when they go to first period of class, they're really not in the mood for a teacher to tell them to take their head off the desk or you know, you can't talk to someone or whatever. And so they react and respond. And as a dean, you have to find out what's going on with this person, with this young person who's upset about it. So not having stable housing, not having that place to go is a tremendous issue for our community and for our young people. They don't have a place to stay. They do not work well when they don't know that they have another place to go to in that. So our workforce housing program is not the same group of people that Mr. Singh works with. However, we would love to partner. I made a note here about some of the issues of literacy education. We have community centers that can probably be utilized for those types of programs to help them. But we want people to go into workforce housing. In District 7, most of over 54% of everyone who lives in my district are renters. And so it is great to have that housing. It is great to have a place for people to stay, but it also changes this dynamic of this neighborhood because it has not always been so. These were the neighborhoods where families and everybody lived and all of the children grew up in, and they had created a bond in these neighborhoods. And now you see that the neighborhoods are turning into mostly rental properties and rental units. And so establishing home ownership and creating the opportunities for home ownership, I am looking for that to help stabilize that rental market that's coming into my district. Our housing initiative is for the entire city. It's going to go for the entire city because right now most of our lands are in parks and that sort of thing. So we don't have like vacant parcels just out there waiting for us to develop. So we have to be more creative with what we have. I tell people about the piece of property that's down here that's a huge parking lot. You can't have huge parking lots that are just parking lots anymore. And all they do is park cars Monday through Friday, and Saturdays and Sundays they are vacant. You have to be able to utilize your property and utilize your assets in a different way. And so I'm excited about that task force because we put on there people who were in the know about housing and how we could move forward in making sure that just making that little dent in affordable housing. We are also not against the rental market. If there's an opportunity for us to get housing, a personal note here, I come from a community in Century where you had one of the highest poverty rates in the state of Florida when I was growing up in Century, Florida. Our house was a house that you could see the stars at night, and it was cold where in the wintertime, even though we don't have cold winters, a bottle of water would freeze. So the housing has become a passion of mine to make sure that we can ensure that type of stability, better home ownership. And you don't have to have the brand new house. I know some of the people I talk to about housing, if you cannot have a penny job and looking at a house that's $1 million job. You can't do that. So if you only have X number of dollars, and when you go looking for a house and your dreams and your desires are just for this dream house that you want, we have to start small. You have to start with that starter home first. And then once you start with that starter home, we kind of build up to the house that we really want. And people do that. That's the way they used to do it years ago. You didn't start out with the house that you wanted right off. You kind of started with the starter home, knew that you were going to be there, 5 to 10 years. Maybe you're going to be there until the children got old enough. But then you went and you looked for another house. So we kind of have to bring people's expectations back to where we can be more effective in finding homes. And so that's basically what I have in reference to our housing initiative and our housing program for the city right now. We have to remember when you look at our housing budgets, whether or not you look at the housing budgets for the county or whether or not you look at it for the city, in the past, those dollars did not come from those general funds at all, for whether it was for the county or whether it was for the city. Normally, your housing always came from either your SHIP programs, from the state, from your HUD and federal programs, CDBG, all of those from federal governments. There was not this idea that the counties or the city had a responsibility for the housing of citizens. And we just need to change that. There is a responsibility, and we need to kind of coordinate and work together with partners to do to improve that and to prove that vision. Because housing this problem cannot be done just with a government fix. It's just not going to be done with a governmental fix. It has to include our private partners, our organizational partners, developers, contractors. Everyone has to come in. I know in Durham, I think it's Durham, North Carolina, our former city manager, Tom Barnfield, they have went out and stepped out on a great housing initiative for Durham, and the whole county bought into this housing initiative. And so they've created a type of funding that the citizens have agreed to pay to address housing. So we will need to be able to look at housing as a whole. It will stabilize our community. It will stabilize our county. So, any questions?
So much for that.
Marcie, do you have any follow-up?
Well, we do have some questions. Thank you both for that. And Councilwoman, I think I'll direct the first one to you since you're already unmuted. There was one that was specifically addressed to you, and it talks about, it says for Councilwoman, how do programs like Pensacola Habitat, who have been creating affordable units since 1981, get creative with land in a constant challenge? You talked earlier about you just can't have a parking lot. So what do you see are some particular things that can be done in this particular area?
What you normally would do is you would connect to partners. You would do normally private developers. You will look at them because, of course, when you do private developers, everyone's looking for some type of profit margin. You know, you're not going to be able to say even profit because people are not going to invest in something that they're not, going to be able to see a return on. But you can offer that type of return in reference to being creative about turning parking lots into multi-use facilities where you have mixed use at the bottom where businesses are there, and then you have housing on top of those. And so you can create an environment not only that's advantageous to the neighborhood and create strong neighborhoods and provide resources, but also gives that private developer an opportunity as well to show a profit, because they're just not going to come in it just because of, the kindness of their hearts. They want some type of profit and what that profit margin is. So you have to offer something. You have to offer some type of help. Sometimes it's incentives. Sometimes it is maybe an e-date where they get a tax exemption. Some of those types of things. All of those things play a role in how we are able to get that type of housing. There was a house above on Merino Street. When we talk about rent, that it was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house that was renting for $1,400. And so everybody looking at the house, even with a HUD voucher, it was $1,400. And they still could not afford to rent that house. And it was not one house, and this is about the PHS area. There was not one house at the time, and this was about last summer, that was renting under $1,200. And one of them was a 2-bedroom. So we will have to deal with the housing and the rent, but the more housing that comes on, the smaller the amount of people that need will eventually, I hope, reduce housing, because you become a competitive, not in the way in which we do it now. There are very few opportunities available. There are very few houses that are affordable, and so the market drives that price. That is how that works. The market drives, you have this high demand, and therefore that high demand drives the prices. An infusion of more affordable housing, an infusion of more ability to even rental units, you would hope that it would drive down those prices.
Thank you for that answer there, Councilwoman. I can tell you there's a ton of questions coming in. Some of these questions I'm skipping over because I'm going to bring Abe back in a few short minutes, but I'm trying to make sure that I direct the questions that are directly asked to you all. As a task force, talk to us about the barriers that your task force is facing when addressing these 6 areas of concern that you're looking at trying to implement. You talked about engaging, you talked about collaborating. What barriers or obstacles as citizens potentially we can do to help alleviate?
Marcie?
Well, as from just a partnership standpoint, really just having people willing to come to the table and talk and begin to develop the strategies that we're going to use to move forward. Also, from the private sector, obviously, as we're looking for incentives that truly are going to help spur the development of affordable housing, we're going to want to have the that private sector at the table, giving us some guidance, giving us some information as to what we're working on.
So, Councilwoman and Marcie, since you all in the same room, with one of the others speaking, if you don't mind muting, that way we can make sure we don't get the echo. And also, Marcie, when you're talking, you might want to turn your mic back up a little bit, because I think we may have missed what you said. I got probably about 60% of that, but if you
Okay.
Okay.
So right now, Marcie, we don't hear you at all. Jewel, is it possible you can pitch it or?
Okay, go ahead, Marcie.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Basically, I'm talking.
We lost you, Marcie. Are you still there? Can you say something again? We lost your sound altogether. So if you don't mind, we may pivot here a little bit. Save that answer. See if you can get tech support in. Maybe log out and log back in, and we'll pivot a little bit if you don't mind until we can get your mic under fixed. Or I'm not sure what exactly happened with. So Councilwoman, we were talking about in your 6 things you talked about the inventory, and I just want to make sure you talked about being creative about it. I just want to make sure that what you said was there's not a surplus of inventory that the city has right now in order to build these single family or to address this workforce issue, and you just want to find more creative ways of that. I want to circle back to that to make sure that we touch on that. If you would unmute yourself, Councilwoman.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, when you drive around town, especially when I'm driving around my area, I see old businesses. They've been vacant for 20 years. They've been vacant there. How can we use that building? How can that building be turned into housing? Again, you're looking at different ways to address housing versus if you have a small lot, are you able to put a 700 square feet house on this little small lot, maybe a 1-bedroom on the small lot versus looking for something that you may want to do multi-story or something. So taking advantage of some of those types of things, because we do have a lot of vacant spaces that have been unoccupied for years. And if you have a warehouse, how can the warehouse be turned into something that's going to be a housing unit or more units? So that's what I'm talking about, is thinking, kind of out of the box. The other thing is because of density, you may want to go up. If you build in a complex, instead of building a single story complex, you may want to build 3 stories. You probably won't go no higher than that when you're dealing in neighborhoods so that it'll fit in. But instead of building a single story, why not build 3 stories so that you can have more than just that one family living there, but it turns into a multiple family complex versus just a single family. So we have to take advantage of our density. We have good density ordinances here within the city of Pensacola. So we have to take advantage of those things that allow us to go up, because when you don't have out and you don't have enough to expand, the only place that we have to go is up.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Abe, I'm also going to bring you back into this discussion. We do have several questions, but I want you to have the opportunity to chime in on some of them because I think maybe perhaps you can answer as well. But I do want to circle back. They're coming in and people are liking them, so I'll look at one and then all of a sudden it'll pop up something else. So there's one I like particularly. It says, has there been any discussion around accessible housing? If so, how would this be addressed?
Accessible housing. I don't know what the question is. That's what we are addressing now. We're addressing affordable housing.
Right.
I don't know if the originator of that question is go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know if I trust myself.
Yeah. Go ahead.
In the meantime, Marcie, you kind of did the accessible housing is talking about people who have different challenges, abilities, and things of that nature.
Yeah, actually, Carolyn Growie, the executive director for Center for Independent Living, is one of the members on our task force. And one of the things that she came out with as an overarching goal for the task force was that they, all the strategies and all the incentives prioritize equity, accessibility, and affordability. So make sure that as we are building, especially when we're building multifamily and those kinds of complexes, that there is that component for accessibility. But even as we're looking to build some of maybe our single family units, to take the accessibility features into consideration. You know, something as simple as if you go ahead and fit out a unit where there's extra structural components like in the restroom areas and stuff. So at that point where maybe you want to put in grab bars or things like that, it's not a complete rehab or redo of the unit. It's something that's accessible for those families.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, for that. And while you're there, I mean, you and Abe probably can answer this question for me. It says, are there any programs designed to transition people out of subsidized housing?
Well, for the Section 8 program, actually what happens is as a family reaches what we call self-sufficiency, which means they're paying all their rent plus utilities. For 6 months, they continue to have their voucher in place just to make sure that they really are stable. Then at the end of that period, their voucher's expired. They're no longer a participant on the voucher program. So that is kind of a natural transition out of that Housing Choice Voucher Program.
I have a comment there. I have a comment on it.
Yes, ma'am.
You have to talk to me clear when you say accessory. You know, I'm handicap accessibility, all those types of things. You have to be clear with me because I'm not.
I'll do
those
that.
are new terms that are okay. The transitioning people out of housing. I've been doing some research and I'm still working on the research in the housing and public housing or any type of housing. You should not be in the housing for 20 to 30 years. I mean, there has to be an education program where, again, we go back to you start off here at this point, because many people start out renting. So I start out renting, you know, I'm going to be renting for 5 or 10 years or maybe till I can get in a position. Then I look for, you know, housing. So what I have seen recently is that you get people who stay in the housing, you know, for the 20 or 30 years, then their grandchildren come around and they stay. So their children and their children and their grandchildren, everybody come. And so the idea here is for the next generation of people to own a home or the next generation to progress better in that. And so that is an education of that expectation is just very, very important. How we're going to get that in there, I don't know at the moment. I haven't talked with Marcie or the task force about that, or Mr. Singh about any of that. But that education piece and the expectation of getting those things that you want is better. I remember telling someone that my godmother, she had a jar. She had one of those old canning jars. And every time she wanted something and she didn't have the money for, all of her change and everything would go in the canning jar. And so over a period of time, when she went back there, it wasn't like the bank because she didn't go to a bank. You know, she didn't deal with the bank. So over a period of time, you know, after a year or so, she went there to her canning jar, and she had put down what she wanted on, you know, what they wanted, and then she went back to that canning jar, and the savings and everything was there for her to get started with something. And so given this idea that a part of the education, a part of the whole literacy idea of home ownership is very, very important. How are we going to merge that? I don't know, because sometimes that becomes a very touchy issue for people. They don't really want to discuss that they are supposed, they're transitioning into a better housing situation for them. So sometimes that can get kind of touchy for some, but I think it's a conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah. Councilwoman, you have talked about the 500 homes in 5 years, but from your dialogue you just gave me, it also speaks to not just housing. You're talking about breaking generational poverty, and so you're really looking at this from a larger perspective. The housing aspect is one little point inside of it, which stabilizes that individual family, and so you want to look a little bit deeper. And I say all that to say because I think this is a great segue into another question that was asked. It says, how do we create a more accessible, diverse workforce in our community that allows folks to cultivate wealth and grow upward instead of remaining stagnant?
Okay, now that's a very hard question because we have to begin to change cultural norms, those cultural norms that have occupied us or had us for the last 50 years. Our community, you know, and African American, we're the biggest consumers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're consumers. We get a dollar, we spend that dollar. So we need to not only do we spend that dollar, you don't necessarily spend the dollar in the community where the money is going to turn over in our community. So when you're talking about how do you create wealth, wealth is with owning a home. I've always thought wealth is owning a home. Wealth appreciates. It does not depreciate like that car that you went and you spend $600 a month on for that car. So again, the whole culture aspect of what we value as important. If we value home ownership as important, then we will need to take steps to do that. If we value wealth, another one of our areas for our community is small businesses. Right now, small businesses are taking a really big hit because of COVID. So again, those opportunities in which to gain wealth can come from small businesses. But when you just starting out, my first job was working in the field making $5 a day. You know, my second job, when they talked about the minimum wage, I remember the job was $2.10 an hour. When I was in the military, my first paycheck that I brought home after taxes was $168 every 2 weeks. So we start at a point in our lives, and then we say, these are the things that we want in our lives. And yes, our journey will have hiccups, our journeys will have children and other things that go along in there. But that journey should include some important things. Education is one. You know, you have to be trained in there. Someone told me they didn't want to cut grass and everything. I said, there's no problem in cutting grass. I said, why don't you just have the grass cutting business so that you can create a business to cut grass, so that you can create the wealth, so that you can hire someone, so that you can have your own home. So that education and important part in our community is going to be an important part, as well as looking at how our labor force has changed. Our labor force has changed in the community. We need to go into that labor force, whether it's cybersecurity, computer technology, aviation, all of those things that pay those wages that are livable wages. So we start at a point, then we move up, and that expectation is that we do move up.
Thanks for that. Hey, do you have anything that you want to chime in on that? What are you seeing from your perspective, families, and how are you changing the behavioral norm that needs to be addressed?
Well, HUD's intentional public housing was never meant to be permanent housing. When in the 1930s, when public housing was first introduced, it was a stepping stone for individuals and families, as Council Lady Jewel had mentioned. It was just a stepping stone for them to, own or towards ownership. But I think we are dealing with so many tensions, such as education. And I have these 6 things that I would like to share very quickly. We should bring education, high school completion, GED completion on the campuses of public housing to my residents. We have community centers that can accommodate classroom settings right now. We had at one time we had 3 Head Start programs through community action, but because of funding cuts, we lost all 3 Head Start programs. We should bring family education into public housing. And most importantly, we should bring a child care program to public housing, so our mothers and fathers can go out and get the training and get the job while we are babysitting the children in an educational setting. Of course, obviously, we need more low-cost housing. And the last one for all of us, the city and the county and the state government should come together collectively and begin to understand the problems that public housing and nonprofit organizations are faced with. And we should work together with all of our government entities, from the city, from the county, and up to the state.
Thank you for that, sir. Appreciate that. Councilwoman, the design overlay has been hindering to development of some affordable housing. How do you plan to address this in order to be successful in your plan?
Currently, the design overlay, if a person is having a problem with the overlay, they should contact the CRA, and the CRA will address their issues. We hired a consultant over for a year or two, to make sure that if we had to tweak the overlay, we would be able to tweak the overlay. However, if you go into any other areas, you just can't put anything in the African-American neighborhood that is not conducive, that's not a part of that neighborhood, and change that neighborhood. We want our neighborhoods to look like our neighborhoods. We don't want suburban development, at least I don't want suburban development to come in and take over the character and essence of our neighborhoods. And that is what happened. You have suburban designs want to come in and just put them all over our neighborhood. If there are problems with the basic requirements of that, then they can go to the CRA and be able to get those things addressed. We have a list of those. They're going to come back and we're going to talk about them, because of course we want everything to be fair. It is not something, but we want also our neighborhoods to be developed in the way in which creates good and positive neighborhoods.
Thank you, Councilwoman. One of the things I wanted to mention was, because I heard in you all's talk, you talked a little bit about the missing middle housing. You talked about duplexes, triplexes, walkable type things. My question to you, as the 500 homes in 5 years campaign is going on, is that something that you all are open to, or is the city or the county maybe open to that suggestion of going back and reaching that those middle houses, those duplexes, perhaps the ones that look like they're a normal house, but you would have 2 or 3 families living there?
The city is going to hire a housing coordinator. So there will be someone that's going to be focused on housing in this area. When we talk about the HUD housing, when we talk about Section 8, those people are paid out of a different pot of dollars. And so therefore their focus is on those particular areas. This particular project and other housing projects, we need to kind of bring some type of centralization to the goals of housing. We include all of those, but we need one person, and there will be a person that will be able to look at the housing stock and opportunities as a whole for the whole city. So we're hoping that that one person that will be able to do that and help us connect the dots and look at all opportunities. You got to look at all opportunities here for housing.
Mhm. Thank you for that, ma'am. I'm circling through trying to see if I have another question here. Here's a profound one. I haven't seen this before, so I want to ask it. It says, when will improvements to things like sidewalks or resources catch up to the development of new homes in the rapidly developing Pensacola community?
The sidewalk issue is a major issue for the community. Some areas you have sidewalks. The first step that we have to do is look at a sidewalk policy. We have a policy now that we have people who can opt out of a sidewalk in their neighborhood, which is not conducive to the flow and the flow of sidewalks. We also have sidewalks that are already down, already built, but are not wide enough. They do not meet a standard. So I did some research through Texas and all other cities to create a sidewalk program altogether for a size city of the city of Pensacola. We're talking about $230 to $300 million. This is millions of dollars to do sidewalk. So the conversation has to be had is how should sidewalks, where should sidewalks be? Creating a ordinance or a policy that addresses, if you're gonna get a sidewalk, no one's can opt out of the sidewalk. Because we have some people who don't want sidewalks. So whether or not sidewalks should be in all of the neighborhoods or should they just connect major areas? Should they just connect to major resources, whether it's a park, whether it's a pharmacy, whether it's the hospital? So all of these questions have to be addressed and then going out for the funding for this and creating that plan. And that plan has not been created.
Thank you, ma'am. This question is circles back to Abe. Abe, you brought up some things that you wanted to see inside of the public housing sector. And the question is are the families ready for those particular resources that you're proposing to bring back into public housing? And if they are not, how do we get them ready for those to accept those particular resources? Abe, you're muted in case you're talking. There you go.
Yeah, we have a lot of families that are requesting for these services to be introduced. We also have a handful of families that will need tremendous amount of encouragement and speaking with to accept these types of responsibilities and to act on these services positively. So we have two groups of individuals or families. One family is already asking for this, and the other ones will need a lot of coaching. We're able to get our mothers, summer employment at the hotels on the beach and all the hotels here, but there is no way for them to be transported to their place for employment, and again, transportation is a huge conduit to what we're talking about, Al.
Thank you, sir, for that. I want to make sure, because we're wrapping up here, wanted to make sure I give each and every one of you an opportunity to close out today's summit. So if you don't mind, Councilwoman Wynn, do you have anything that you would like to add prior to us closing out?
The only thing is thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of this. It's important. The dialogue is important. I would like for Mr. Singh to send me his list so that I can pass that list on, but also that the affordable housing project is only a small portion of the many needs that we need. It's only one step. There has to be other steps that go along with that. And I asking the community to help me work with that so that we can take a step and move forward to others.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I really appreciate you giving us your time and energy and effort and insight today. Marcie, are you able, is your mic
Come on,
working?
Marcie. Come on.
Well, while you're getting settled in, Marcie, I'm going to circle back to Abe. Abe dropped us a list of about 6 things, and make sure, Abe, you do kind of send that list over to us. That way, if people have questions about them, we make sure we share them with you. So, Abe, give us your part of the comments, please, sir.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me, Al? All of a sudden, I lost contact with everybody.
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So yes, I will. I will send the list to Council Lady Canada, and this has been a very invigorating conversation amongst all of us, and I encourage to move further with this now, and let's begin to work at the problems that are impeding us and facing us, and let's look for solutions from all of the organization, including all of the governmental agencies as well.
Well, thank you, sir. We definitely appreciate you for bringing your insight onto today's summit. Again, thank you very much, and I am very humbled by you blessing us with your presence, but also by you just being encouraging us and telling us to make sure we just don't reduce this to talk. We want to make sure we move forward with our efforts in this challenge that we're facing as a city, as a population. I do have, Marcie, you're set for your closing.
I am. Just thank you so much for having myself and the council president on today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share what the city's putting in place with the community at large. And thank you to those members in the community who have signed on and are listening too. We will be making outreach to the community for support as we move forward. Like the council president said, we're hoping to hire a position, and one of their main focuses is going to be the implementation of the goals that we come out with the task force. So just thank you again, and thank you to Habitat for the service you provide to our community.
Thank you, Marcie. Definitely appreciate you for being here. We appreciate all the people who attended this summit today. We appreciate all the participants, all the questions you sent us. We just want to thank you for participating in our annual summit. We look forward to bringing you something a little bit more often, because we know that this is an issue that needs to be addressed, and we need to make sure, like Councilwoman Cannada-Wynn said a little earlier, we want to make sure we grasp that momentum. We have a number. We have things that are on the table that we are addressing, so we want to make sure that we at Habitat help those things be addressed and be a part of the discussion, at least facilitating the discussion and talks. One of the things that came out today that I really, really enjoyed, there's several things that you all talked about, but that creating an adaptive system in order to move from a complicated to a complex, I think we're on the right track. I really do have this feel that as a community, we are addressing these issues and on the right track about identifying the needs, identifying the concerns. There are just a few things, the tweaks that here and there. I think we should make sure we address, which will allow us to leverage our resources a whole lot better. Make sure that when Abe and the area housing has some issues over there that we are already working towards solving or resolving those issues, make sure that 90 works. When they have a family who they are trying to help, perhaps they don't go through a year and a half of trying to make sure they get stable housing. Things of that nature are those things that really hinder us from getting to the next step as far as stable housing and making sure that families are in a position to break that generational poverty. So on behalf of my wonderful team who pulled this off for us today, and on behalf of Pensacola Habitat, I really thank you from the bottom of my heart for participating today. Again, if you send that information or send an email to info@pensacolahabitat.org if you want a copy of the live recording, we will definitely send it out to you. With that, I'll say have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much.